Hey, well, finally, where I'm able to get together and try to kick this critique off. It's been a wild couple of weeks at school. Other stuff has been happening, and I apologize for the late start, but let's get with it. I think this critique section is going to require 4 or 5 modules, but we'll know as we get into it. So let's get started. Here's our first shot. Well, it's an interesting shot of the motorcycle in a garage. I love the monochromatic scheme around this. I think that works really, really well. The only problem with this is it's really flat. It's underexposed, and that means that there's no real data in here. If we try to see if there is any, it's easy to look at. We'll go to Image, Adjustment, Levels. Right here we can see there is no black here. We could possibly correct this a little with a bit of curves action. And that's going to help us some, but we've still got almost like a ghosting in that tire. It looks like there's smoke all over the place. Maybe it's because it's such a hot bike. There's tire smoke all over, but let's see what we can do to boost it just a little better, at least around the wheels. So I'm going to start by creating a duplicate layer, and we'll do that by grabbing this background layer and pulling it down to this icon, which is the duplication layer or the new layer icon. If I simply clicked on this icon, it would create a new blank layer. But I want to make a duplicate layer, so I'm going to grab this, drag it onto this icon, let go, and now I've got 2 layers. The way these layers work is there are 2 important parts to them. One is the little eyeball here in the far left side. Whichever layer is the topmost layer with the eyeball on it, that is the layer you're looking at. So right now we're looking at this new copied layer. Whichever layer has the highlights is the layer we're working on. Well, in this case, they're identical, so they look the same no matter which one we're looking at. I'm going to use a layer blend mode to see if I can boost up some contrast and then maybe try to select just part of that. The way blend modes work is they apply a change of some sort to the top layer. What you are seeing is the bottom layer with that changed data from the top layer imposing what you're seeing. So here we're going to go, here's all of our layer styles. And they're broken down into different categories. The normal ones on top. We've got this top section, which in one way or another darkens areas. The second section, in one way or another, lightens areas. This part plays with contrast of various types, and then we get into some really esoteric ones that maybe we'll use some today, maybe not, but right now we're going to stick with this one. In the contrast area, overlay builds contrast by starting with middle gray, and anything in the top layer that is lighter will lighten the bottom layer. Anything that is darker will darken the bottom layer, but in the middle, nothing happens. Soft light does exactly the same thing, except not to the same degree. So since I think what I want is fairly subtle, I'm going to try that one first. And what I'm really looking for is what's happening to this tire. Let me see now. I'm going to open these up again, and let's see what happens if I go to the overlay. Yeah, you can see now that tire is so dark it's blending into the background. So I was better off with the soft light. Now what I want to do is simply take part of that, and maybe not to the full extent. The cool thing about layers and layer styles is this opacity allows you to blend the effect back with the original, so there's no effect. And now we can add some as we need it. So I'm going to leave that at about 74-75%. Now what I want to do is I don't want that effect everywhere. I just want it around the bike and the back part of the bike. I'm going to do what's referred to as a layer mask, and that is this icon here. If I click on this icon, now I'm seeing a blank white thumbnail, and that tells me that I've got a positive layer mask going. The layer mask is going to work just like an eraser tool, except I can go back and correct things that I couldn't do if I had used the eraser. Because this is white, I need to use a black brush. And sure enough, in my color patches or over on the other, black is my foreground color. So if I come over and pick a brush, and set the opacity down a little, I'm going to use the bracket keys to make that brush bigger. And by brushing on it, can you see what's happening? It's starting to let you look through from this top overlay layer to the bottom unaffected layer. Here's the bottom layer. Here's the top. And if you look at this mask, you can see where it's gray and darker. That's where it has bled through, or in essence erased through, to the bottom layer. So I'm going to take that, and I also want to deal with this highlight here, and I'm going to do it in a very similar way so you can see what happens there. The first thing I'll do is flatten this, make a new layer, and now I'm going to use a multiply layer. Oh yes, see all the detail I brought in here? The problem is, if I use a layer mask this way, I'm going to have to keep this and try to erase everything around it. But I don't want to do that. I want to make it easy. So I'm going to come down to the layer mask tool, hold down the Alt key, and now I get a black thumbnail, and this looks like the original. If I paint on this with white, now I'm painting through it. So I'll change the brush to white. And you can see as I work through here, look at the icon, there is the darken, or the darker area I'm seeing on the bottom one. If I want to enhance that effect, I can simply duplicate this layer. Whenever you duplicate a layer, it duplicates everything, including all of the settings. Let me go up. I want to see what happens here. Ah, look at that. We're starting to bring that floor in. So we could continue this until we were getting things right where we wanted them. Other than that, I think this composes pretty well. I like the strong line out of it. It's just an exposure problem. You needed more exposure here. Remember, as long as you haven't totally wiped out shadows and highlights, we can bring them back in digital. But if you've lost them, if it goes so dark that there's nothing on that histogram down in the shadows, then there's nothing we can do to bring it back. It's just gone. So Be really careful with your exposures. Okay, let's do the next one. Oh, this is interesting. This will give us a chance to play. This is a cool building. This your home? Wow. You're going to invite us all over for tea and crumpets in this poor little shack of a place? Well, what I want to show you here is a trick that architectural photographers use when they've shot something but they can't really either afford or they did not have, for some reason, a proper view camera to shoot the architecture. Because you're looking up at this building, you can see there are several problems with the lines that we're seeing. And if I go up to view, I can start creating some guides if my rulers are set. So I want my display to show rulers. In this case, you can see the little check mark by it, so they're there, and that's the rulers along here. Why does that matter? Because if the rulers are showing, I can click and drag on them and compare angles. So you can see that this line across the building that ought to be horizontal isn't. And we can also see that this line that should be vertical isn't. Nor is that one. So we need to do some serious straightening. And we can do it fairly simply in Photoshop. The first thing that we're going to do is select all. That's going to select the entire frame. And you can see the little marching ants around it all. Then we'll come to Edit, Transform, and we've got a number of options here. And for our purposes, we want the one that says Skew. And all of a sudden, we get these little handles on this particular image. How do we straighten this line up? Simple. We grab this handle and pull it out. Since we have this line to straighten, we grab this handle, pull it up. And we'll do the same over here with this angle, assuming I can grab it. Double check, make sure that when you pulled one side, it didn't screw up the other. If we hit enter, it takes that. We'll come over, select, deselect. We'll clear those guides. And there's our straightened up picture. And we can compare that by clicking on the snapshot and looking at, here's what we have now, there's the way it was. When you're shooting architecture, because when we do this, we're going to pull things out quite a bit, slightly overshoot your composition so that there's room to make these corrections and make this building look a lot straighter, as if you were shooting it head on. Okay, let's see our next one. Oh, look at this poor little dog. Oh my God, this poor little dog has just seen rough time for something so little, huh? Well, one of our big issues here clearly is color balance. This was shot at probably with incandescent light or some kind of indoor light, but I'm guessing, unless this dog is yellow and unless the furniture in the background or the back walls are yellow, that this isn't the right color. In Adobe Camera Raw, you could have started to correct this. We could have gone in to the Camera Raw box, and in that clicked on the first eyedropper and found something in here that ought to be white or neutral and clicked on it. And there we have the proper color balance. But let's say that you weren't able to do that and we're stuck with this. There is a way to do this in Photoshop. It's a little more complicated, but it works fairly well. And just to give us some breathing room, I'm going to make a duplicate copy. Whenever you're starting to mess around with something that's a core part of an image, make a copy, make another layer, and work on that. If you screw it up, then all you have to do is dump it and go back to the original, and you haven't lost anything. So I'm going to come up here to Image, Adjustments, and then I want Photo Filter. So it's Image, Adjustments, Photo Filter. And I get this little dialog box. Now what this is actually for is to add a filter if you were doing that to an image, the same way you would put a filter on your camera. But we're going to use it a little differently. Up here, if you wanted to add filters, there are all kinds of them that are standard color filters, color correction filters. But I want to come down here, pick color. When I click on this box, it opens up a color dialog. But now I can pick, once this is open, I can choose a color anywhere on the screen, anywhere in this work area. And I want this color because that's the color I want to correct. And you can see now this is the color I've just picked. Now, in color theory, what I need to do in order to bring this to neutral is to filter it with its exact opposite color. So if I come down into this dialog box and look at the lab color, the LAB color, remember we talked about that, where that lab color comes from. So this is luminosity, and this is the A and B channels of the color. If I come down to the A and B channels, and I change them, if they are positive, make them minus. If they are minus, make them positive. In this case, both of them are positive, so I'm going to add the minus number to them. This new color is the exact opposite of the color that was there. So I'm going to say OK. And now I'm going to apply that filter. And now again, I've corrected that image. So this is a really pretty good way to accomplish that. So I'm going to say OK. And because that works so well, I'm just going to flatten that. I'll stay with this final image. And now I do want to crop it. I mean, here, this poor little thing, here's his picture. This isn't adding anything to us. Whenever you're taking your photographs, if you want to make them really strong, then decision number one is, where is my photograph? Where in this view is the real image? And I'm going to say it's right in here. So I'm going to crop into that. We could straighten this doorway, but I don't really think that's necessary. Hit enter. And there's our little dog, front and center, the most important part. But I want him to stand out just a little more. So I want to add what's called a vignette, which means I'm going to darken these corners a little bit. I could use the burn tool, but the burn tool is most likely going to disrupt the color. It's wonderful if you're working on a black and white image. It's incredibly easy. Works just like the darkroom tools of burning and dodging do. But in color, it can sometimes really mess up that color. So I'm going to go back to my old favorite, a duplicate layer, and a layer mask. So I'm going to tell this mask to multiply. I'm going to bring the opacity down to where the background part is about where I want it with the vignette, which is about there. I'll click on the layer mask icon. And with a black brush, remember this is a white thumbnail, so I need a black brush to paint on it. And I want this set down low. Whenever you're doing this, start with a low opacity and build to where you want. Don't try to do it in a single pass. Now you can see over here where it's black is where I'm looking through. But that's let me darken the background behind this little dog. And now we have a nice little portrait of him or her. I hope it's doing better and is recovering from whatever evil was visited on it as a little puppy. Sometimes I think humans may deserve this, but I've never believed that dogs do. So let's see what's going to be the last one for this series. Oh, what an interesting architectural shot. This part of the shot is really nice. The exposure is virtually perfect. What you'd want to decide, again, if you're looking, where is your shot? I believe that the shot is there, in this area. This is where the whole shot is, and this really isn't adding too much to it. So before I start worrying about tones, I'm going to see if I can bring this in a little bit. This is a nice S-shaped walkway, but it's distracting. Here's where our main shot is. Right in here. And we don't need all of this. This is a nice upsweep. I want to keep that sense, so I'm not going to bring this down very much. And we can bring this up just a little. We only need so much of this area to tell us what it is. Most of us can figure out that this is a set of steps. So now we're honed in on the real thing. Our problem is this. We're losing some of this detail. So we need to darken this sky a little bit so we haven't lost this. Now I'm going to zoom way in on this so I can do a little bit of work. I'm going to take this, since I've got all these wonderful angular lines, I'm going to use the magnetic lasso tool. I'm going to start at this corner. I'm clicking at each of these starting points. Yeah, it's enough. Now, the only reason I've selected that is I want to make sure nothing happens to this building. And I'm going to pick up the very subtle tone of the sky from here. It's not pure white. Let's see what it actually looks like. Darken it just a little. Then I'll take my brush. I'll set the opacity to very low, maybe 14%. And I can start to add a little bit of difference between the sky and that building. I think I probably need that to be even just a little bit darker. There we go. Now, I'm going to remove the selection. And now I can use this brush telling it to darken. What happens is, remember, it's this color. It's a very light color. If I tell the brush to darken, it will only paint on its own color or lighter. So it isn't going to paint on most of that other building. I'm not going to have to worry about painting over it. I can even out the sky a little bit from that. Now let's see it all. Now what's happened is I'm able to see this building separated from the background a little better. Cool. Very nice shot. Nicely composed. Okay. That's going to finish it for part 1. Let's go on to part 2. I'll see you in a moment.